This is the second part of future hydrogen or electric vehicles in India. In first part we cover brief overview of the history of EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India. Current state of the market for EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India, advantages of hydrogen and EVs and challenges facing the adoption of EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India. We continue this video by talking about 4 challenges facing the adoption of EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India. D. Limited availability of vehicles. Limited availability of electric and hydrogen vehicles is also a challenge facing the adoption of these vehicles in India. Currently, the number of models of electric and hydrogen vehicles available for purchase in the Indian market is limited. These challenges are significant, but they can be overcome with proper government policies, incentives and infrastructure investments. With the right approach, the adoption of electric and hydrogen vehicles in India can be accelerated, which will benefit the environment, the economy, and society as a whole. Government policies and initiatives to promote the adoption of EVs and hydrogen vehicles. A. FAME India scheme, the faster adoption and manufacturing of hybrid and electric vehicles in India. FAME India is scheme of government initiative to promote adoption of electric and hybrid vehicles in India. The scheme provides incentives for manufacturers and consumers of electric and hybrid vehicles. The incentives include subsidies on the purchase of electric and hybrid vehicles, as well as incentives for setting up charging and battery swapping infrastructure. B. National Electric Mobility Mission Plan, NEM. The National Electric Mobility Mission Plan, NEM, is a government initiative aimed at promoting the adoption of electric vehicles in India. The plan was launched in 2013 with the goal of having 6 to 7 million electric and hybrid vehicles on Indian roads by 2020. Under the plan, the government provides subsidies and incentives for manufacturers and consumers of electric vehicles, as well as for setting up charging infrastructure. C. National Hydrogen Energy Mission. The National Hydrogen Energy Mission is a government initiative aimed at promoting the adoption of hydrogen vehicles in India. The mission is aimed at promoting the development of hydrogen energy infrastructure and applications in India. The government will provide subsidies and incentives for manufacturers and consumers of hydrogen vehicles, as well as for setting up hydrogen fueling infrastructure. D. Other government policies and initiatives. The Indian government has also announced other policies and initiatives to promote the adoption of EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India. For example, the government has announced plans to increase the adoption of electric vehicles in the country. In 2020, the Indian government announced plans to have 30% of all vehicles in India electric by 2030. Additionally, the government has also announced plans to set up more charging and hydrogen fueling infrastructure in the country. The Indian government is taking the right steps in promoting the adoption of electric and hydrogen vehicles in India, but more needs to be done. The government should continue to provide incentives and subsidies for manufacturers and consumers of electric and hydrogen vehicles, as well as invest in charging and hydrogen fueling infrastructure. With the right approach, the adoption of electric and hydrogen vehicles in India can be accelerated, which will benefit the environment, the economy, and society as a whole. Conclusion. A. Summary of the main points. In this video, we discuss the topic of future of hydrogen or electric vehicles in India. We looked at the history of EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India, the advantages and challenges of these types of vehicles, and the government policies and initiatives aimed at promoting their adoption. We also provided an overview of the current state of the market for EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India. The future outlook for EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India. The future outlook for EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India is positive, with the market for these vehicles expected to grow in the coming years. The Indian government has announced several policies and initiatives to promote the adoption of EVs and hydrogen vehicles, such as the National Electric Mobility Mission Plan, the FAME India scheme, and the National Hydrogen Energy Mission. However, the widespread adoption of EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India will depend on the availability of charging and hydrogen fueling infrastructure, as well as the affordability of these vehicles for the average Indian consumer. See final thoughts and recommendations. The adoption of EVs and hydrogen vehicles in India can have a significant impact on the country's transportation sector, reducing dependence on fossil fuels and decreasing emissions. However, there are still several challenges facing the widespread adoption of these vehicles in India, such as lack of infrastructure, high costs, limited range, and limited availability of vehicles. The Indian government should continue to provide incentives and subsidies for manufacturers and consumers of electric and hydrogen vehicles, as well as invest in charging and hydrogen fueling infrastructure. Additionally, the industry should also work towards making these vehicles more affordable for the average Indian consumer. With the right approach, the adoption of electric and hydrogen vehicles in India can be accelerated, which will benefit the environment, the economy, and society as a whole.